So bass fishing in its simplest form is all about transitions. All throughout the year, all different times a day, it's all about transitioning from certain baits into other techniques, whether it be from crank baits into swim baits, whether that be from spinner baits to jerk baits. It's all about adjusting to the mood of the fish and understanding what the conditions are presented with. One of the biggest transitions that we have to deal with is transitioning from the spawn to post-spawn, because what happens is those fish go up, they haven't really seen baits all spring for the most part, they're coming out of their deeper water to spawn, and now once the spawn's over, these fish are starting to spread back out, they're getting pressured a ton, they're probably the most pressured they'll be all year, and that changes some things, right? And one of the biggest changes that I want to talk about is transitioning from in the pre-spawn and spawn, throwing a jig, to now in the post-spawn transitioning to a creature bait or a Texas rig. And I want to talk about why that is, because it's something that nobody really talks about, but it's supposed to be a staple or like a known in bass fishing, that once the post-spawn starts, you transition from that jig to a creature bait. So let's break down why that is, and let's kind of get you guys some more information on why we switch that way. So the main reason that a jig works so well in the pre-spawn and up to the spawn is kind of what I hinted at earlier, in that those fish really haven't seen a whole lot of baits going up to the spawn. You know, once those fish are just starting to come up, they're pretty fresh, they're still white, they really haven't seen a whole lot of jigs or a whole lot of baits, period. And so a jig being a bulkier bait is a great way to get those bigger fish to bite, and it's just a bulkier profile. Those fish are feeding up for the spawn, gearing up, getting ready for the most stressful time period of their entire lives every year, you know, during the spawn. And so they're eating a lot of bigger meals. And that's why people throw a jig, because you have a lot of secondary action with that jig, with all the skirt material on there. You know, a lot of times you're using the same baits that you're using on a Texas rig, but on the back of a jig. And so it's just a bigger overall profile. And so those fish, having not seen a ton of baits coming up, it's just a perfect meal for them. And whether you're flipping wood, laydowns, offshore, you're dragging a jig deep, you're fishing riprap, doesn't matter. Those fish haven't seen it, it's a big profile, so they eat it. Well, now it happens. During the spawn, those fish are getting pressured by everybody and their brother, because once they know they're up there spawning, everybody wants to catch them. I go out, everybody goes out. It's just a great time of year to go bass fishing. There's a ton of fish shallow, you can catch a bunch of fish, you can see them, so it's a really interactive way to take new people out on the water, and it's just fun. Weather's starting to get nicer. And now, in the post-spawn, weather's getting even nicer, weather's getting hotter. Those fish have been pressured, they've been super stressed, they've seen 1,000 baits a day, and so everybody's throwing, you know, all the people that were throwing a jig now aren't getting bit on a jig, and so they switch to a Texas rig. And why is that? Well, because a jig has so much secondary action with all of those tentacles and everything going everywhere, what ends up happening is there's so much more movement involved that those fish kind of shy away from it. After having seen thousands and thousands of baits, a ton of jigs now, because everybody when they go fishing likes to throw a jig. It's kind of a staple, right? Everybody wants to throw a jig. So they've seen a ton of them, they've seen a ton of baits that have skirts on them. And so you get all that movement, and those fish just kind of get weary of it, right? It's kind of like if you've been trapped by picking up a hot dog every 5 minutes, and all of a sudden a hot dog falls in front of you again, you're going to go, wait a second, right? You're going to back up because you're going to think about it. So what a Texas rig doesn't have is all of that secondary action. It doesn't have all the tentacles and stuff moving everywhere. It's just a naked bait with a weight on there. The fall rate's a little faster, so it triggers fish a little better. You can slow it down even. You can go to a quarter, you know, it's an eighth. You can downsize it, you can upsize it really easy, but it's a really non-intrusive profile. You can throw a creature bait like a boar hogs, you can throw palmetto bug like a beaver style bait, you can throw a twin tail grub, you can throw, you know, a goat. All of that stuff, it's less intrusive in the fact that there's not a whole lot of secondary action going on. And I know you're going to say, well, a boar hog or a brush hog, those are pretty intrusive baits, right? They're big lizard style baits. And yeah, they are, but they're also naked. They don't have a skirt on them. They're sleek. They're thinner. They look more natural. They're not as, you know, because we get away throwing a lot of baits that look dumb. Right? Like when you look at a jig and all the stuff that it has going on there, all the flaring of those tentacles, it looks buggy, but it also kind of looks dumb. Like once a bass has seen enough of them, it's going to know what's up. Where a Texas rig, being real sleek, real slender, there's not a whole lot else going on, really gets a better imitation of what's going on. And the lizard style baits, there's actually salamanders, there's actually all this other stuff that looks like that, a palmetto bug, there's all kinds of aquatic insects that look like that, and there's all bluegills kind of have that vertical profile when they stand straight up like that. You're getting into that realm of looking more natural. Now, Senko, I have no idea. Don't even get me started. That's a whole other video. But so this post-spawn deal, after these fish have seen all of these different baits, they now are just more pressured and they're more skittish. So that's why people switch to a Texas rig. That's why you want to throw those plastics. That's why you want to throw all of these other baits that don't look as intrusive. That's why you switch from a chatterbait to a jerkbait or a swim bait, because it looks more natural, and these fish have been so pressured that they need that more natural looking bait to now trigger them, because they're still trying to feed up, right? But they're smarter. They're not as smart as they're going to be by the end of the year. You know, by the fall, these fish have seen a bajillion baits. But right now, when it comes to shallow moving baits, they're about as smart as they're going to get on shallow moving baits, because they've seen a million of them. And so these fish, as they start to transition back out deep, transition away from the bank, they've seen all of the shallow moving baits. And that's why we have to trick them going into a Texas rig style bait, because they've just seen so many baits. So just changing up your weight sizes with that Texas rig to figure out how fast those fish are going to want it. You know, it's super simple whether you have it pegged or not pegged, which is another video we'll get into later. It's a great way to trigger those fish. You get a faster fall rate out of it. You can go all the way up to an ounce. You can go all the way down to a 1/16. You can put real light weights on there. You just have to match that to whatever your fish are looking for. I start out with a quarter, 3/16. If I start flipping heavier cover, I'll go up to maybe 3/8. And if you're punching heavy cover, obviously you want even bigger than that. But I'm not saying a jig won't still work. Don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the majority of fish aren't eating jigs anymore. If you're skipping docks and whatnot, a jig is still a great option. If you're offshore, jigs still work really well. But for those shallow fish, those fish that have seen it all, those post-spawn fish that are real, up in that cover area, it's just a great way to switch to a Texas rig, because you're going to get more bites, and a lot of times you're just going to have a better day on the water weeding through fish. A jig will still get you bites, and you'll still get big bites on it, but you're going to catch a lot less fish. And that's something that nobody talks about with jig fishing, is the less fish you're going to catch on it. A Texas rig, you're going to catch a ton more fish. You're going to have a better day on the water, especially if you're just fun fishing. For another finesse profile we like to talk about, and we like to throw all the time, check this video up here where I break down what I wish somebody would have told me about fishing a drop shot, because post-spawn into the summertime is a great time to break out a drop shot, especially on those offshore fish that really have seen it all. A drop shot is a great way to just downsize your profile and catch a ton of fish. So God bless. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.